Today's episode is sponsored by Tectonic Tourists. Do you need a van or equipment to go on tour? Tectonic Tourists has you covered. Large, reliable vans and great sounding equipment that bands like Metz, City of Caterpillar, Page 99, Chain Cult, Soul Glow, Infant Island, Soft Kill, and many more have used to tour and play all over North America. If you have a tour coming up, go to tectonictourist.com. Tectonic, like tectonic plates. TECTONIC, tourist.com. Hello, and welcome to Everything Remade, a podcast that I hope is about growth as much as it is about music. I'm Edie Quinn, and we have a great show lined up for you today. Before we get started, though, I'd like to remind you about our Patreon page at patreon.com/humanmachine. You can go there to read the latest Sparks magazines as they come out, as well as get music sneak peeks and lots of other cool things. That's patreon.com/humanmachine. And now, I'd like to play something for you. You're hearing Tomorrow Is Never by Locktender, featuring my pal Jason Kallicragas on guitar and vocals. The song comes from their new release, Sage Part 1, which you can find on their Bandcamp now.
I was probably 14 years old when the movie The Royal Tenenbaums came out by Wes Anderson.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know like I wouldn't, like my parents would never have taken me to see that in theaters, but I saw it somehow with a good friend of mine, actually the same friend who was teaching me how to play music. And I remember just being like, I'd never like been like so connected with a film that just like, you know, the cinematography and the music and everything at the time, just like, you know, for my young person, just like I felt very spoken to with that whole thing. So I think that was like, you know, I ended up becoming really, really big into film, studying in college and stuff like that. So I think that was a pretty memorable first artistic experience.
Yeah. Now, is this just like, you could speak to that a lot more now because you are knowledgeable in the subject, and
Sure.
Some of that you might even say, well, that's a little bit of like revisionist history, but as far as just like, if you could put yourself back in that 14-year-old body for a minute, in that 14-year-old mind, like what, you know, you mentioned the cinematography, and it was just like, but was it just so different from like what you were used to seeing?
I think, as a revisionist and someone who's studied film, like what the stuff kind of things he was pulling from historically, like the French New Wave of the cinema of the '60s, which I also really love. I had no experience with that, right? So I think he was pulling these influences that I didn't have, I hadn't really been exposed to, and then it was my first time kind of seeing that in I guess a fairly mainstream way, like a film that I felt was very much not a blockbuster, right? And I think by that age, I was just kind of starting my, some people get kind of exposed to it earlier or later, but for me, that was kind of around when I was getting off of mainstream music and mainstream media and starting to kind of like, get exposed and kind of, become more interested in the stuff that I really liked versus just what was around you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like that's like that reception, like the way you received that? Do you feel like this is part of like the oversaturation of the typical, like, you said like the blockbuster, like that's how a lot of us get into punk rock too, right? Because we're just so oversaturated with everything that's on the radio. And so was there an element to that to it as well, where you're just like, and then you got this new taste and later you figured it out, like, oh, this is what I liked so much about that.
Yeah. I think when you're young and kind of starting to, form your own identity, sometimes before you know what you are, you kind of learn what you're not. But by that age, I'd kind of learned that I wasn't, I'd played sports as a kid, but I wasn't a jock. I wasn't in this crowd. I wasn't that. And you're kind of like, looking for a place to kind of fit in. So like, then when you associate like art with these certain things, you're like, okay, well, I don't really like these movies and these shows are fine, but then you get that taste of like, oh, like, it's like, I don't know. I think like there's a lot of similarities in all kind of counterculture underground kind of movements.
Yeah.
I work in the craft beer industry, and like when it first started going, like the similarities between punk rock and the early days of craft brewing were so similar, and like I used to see all these really cool parallels between these guys doing these very DIY businesses and very collaborative and very, like, I don't know. I like to see a lot of, you can find connections like that all over the place, but people who think the same, feel the same, end up kind of flocking together, and then that's kind of how you seeing someone with oh shit, that guy's got a T-shirt of a band I like. I didn't know that. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Now we're friends, right? So
you think it starts at like the very basic, what I want isn't here, so I'm gonna make it, and then it all goes from there.
Yeah, and there's this like it's this amazing thing where you like you look back and be like, you'll hear something, you're like, oh man, this is like the most original thing I've ever heard. And then you find someone halfway across the world who's doing the same thing at the same time. And you're just like, oh my God, that's just insane coincidence. But you realize, oh, well, these guys who started this band in 2000 were listening to the same 80s and 90s stuff as these guys. So it's like, I love like if you can web out influences in whatever, right? Visual art, film, literature, punk music, whatever, and kind of find these commonalities of like, where are people coming up with similar things at the same time, and like, and why, right?
Well, and then there's like those theories also of like ancestral memory or whatever, things like that, where almost like individuals tapping into the collective subconscious.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said like if we're the same age and we're experiencing similar, big moments in our lives generationally, or, like the world's, all moving together, right? So like, my anxiety about the future and someone else's, even though we could be from a completely different background, can be kind of fueled by the same things, right?
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, for sure. You said that friend that you went to the movies with
Yeah.
later started showing you how to play guitar. So you didn't start playing guitar until like your mid-teens.
Yeah, yeah. There was like my parents listened to a lot of music, but there was never like no one in our house was musical, and so my brother Andrew, who I mostly played music with throughout my life, he's older, so he was 16 and had got an electric guitar around then, and I was 2 years younger. I was 14, and I got a bass guitar. So my friend was really into like. I think the first riffs he showed me were like Rage Against the Machine riffs and some stuff like that. And so he was kind of like, he kind of taught me some stuff. And then Andrew and I kind of like started playing together like pretty shortly after that. So
Did you feel like there was like Andrew got the guitar and you got the bass guitar? Did you feel like that was almost like a, well, you're the younger sibling, so of course you get the thing with the less strings on it. Was there? I mean, I don't know.
The funny thing is, like, it was actually the other way around, because like, and I think he has this story, but I think he really wanted to play bass. He was like super into Rancid. He loved Matt Freeman. He's like, I really want to play bass guitar, and like, listening to like, Green Day and like just these bands with great bass players, right?
Sure.
And my dad was like, all right, if we're gonna get you an instrument, like we really should get this guitar. Like it's got more strings. Like that's a better value. So like, even though he wanted to play, all he wanted to do was play bass, he ended up with a guitar, which is funny because then when I was looking to play, my brother has a guitar, and my friend, this friend of mine had a guitar. So I'm like, well, it makes sense that I get a bass to kind of play with that. And then I ended up I was really into I was really into a couple of bass players at that time. And then like, again, I played exclusively bass until I was like 16. I started playing guitar so I kind of taught myself guitar for Ministries.
Who were you into? You didn't mention. Is it embarrassing?
No, not embarrassing.
Okay.
It was just, it was like, I was super into the Red Hot Chili Peppers around that time. And like, it was really funny because I like really don't like Anthony Kiedis. But like Flea's a fantastic bass player, and I used to I taught myself how to play by I would play like their albums like through and through. And then like, I don't know, it was kind of funny. Like my early, like a lot of the bands I would listen to, I would like kind of try to ignore everything else. And if I liked the bass player, I'd be into it. So I remember listening to like early Incubus stuff, like had a lot of like that kind of like funk metal bass kind of stuff and like Mudvayne and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't really like this band, but this bass player is really cool, so I'm gonna get into it.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So
yeah, I don't. It's wild. Like, the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Like I grew up listening to their first couple of albums, and it really is wild how talented they all are. And like, even if you don't like Anthony Kiedis, and I don't, like they're all ridiculously talented. And it's such a, like, they're definitely those people that their personalities get in the way. And like, that's 100% them, like at all times, like even back, before they were superstars or whatever.
Yeah. And again, like, I don't know, like it's also, culturally looking back at like anything from like, not even as old as like 20, 30, 40 years ago, like, even like you can just kind of look back and be like, oh yeah, this is a bit like kind of cringy, or this is that. But like, I remember like I would put on Blood Sugar Sex Magic and I would play the bass on that, like pretty much start to finish, except for the last song on that record, which I thought was like kind of a shitty song.
Okay, what's the last one? Because I know that album fairly well.
I don't even know. It's like, it's kind of like, it basically, it kind of sounds like a porno song. And,
Yeah.
and I remember being like, this song's boring. I would skip it. And my parents like found my CD and like found it. And like that song probably has like these really like lewd lyrics. And they're like, I can't believe they took it away. Like, you can't listen to this smut. And we're like, I just care about the bass player. You know?
I don't even know the words.
Yeah. So kind of funny shit. But like, and my parents were funny too. Cause I remember like, we would like listen to like, I don't know, my parents, like, my mom got like really into the Offspring like 10 years ago.
Oh, really?
And she's like, yeah, she's like driving around like listening to Bad Habit. You're like, Mom, like we had to like hide the fact that we listened to this when we were like 12. And now you're just like, this is like the best song ever.
That's funny. That's
It's
awesome.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something. Yeah. It's so. Are your parents like? Have they always been pretty supportive of your bands and stuff, or was that also a thing that perhaps came later?
Our parents, I'd say like not super supportive. Like, I don't think they've ever really got what we were trying to do. Andrew, when he was doing Pack Sounds, like, all right, that makes a little bit of sense, but it's that typical kind of thing. Like, I remember anytime we're playing our music, it's like, oh, this is kind of good. Then you start screaming. It's like, well, I don't know about this anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, well, it's like, I think I remember like I put the Inosuke record out, and my dad was like, oh, you're in a new band. What kind of stuff is this? I'm like, well, it's fucking screamo still. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I might be like, it's been 20 years. I'm like, I'm still doing the same stuff because it's kind of like, this is what I like. So they're kind of supportive. If we're playing near them, they'll kind of come out. But like, I still don't think they really get it, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, yeah, again, I think they think it's nice that we're doing it, but they don't. It's weird because like, we're like, none of my bands have been like wildly successful, but we do have like markers of success.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I think we were decent enough that like labels have decided to put records out for us, and we've been able to go tour in Europe and do that. So they're kind of just like, well, like, I don't get it. Like, so like people like the music you're playing? Like, well, yeah, like not like a lot of people, but some people,
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
anyway,
the 2,000 to 5,000 people worldwide at any given time. Sure.
yeah,
like,
it's like, and like, again, I just like, I love, making and playing this kind of music. And like, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. Like, the idea of not really growing out of it,
mm-hmm.
Like, okay, you listen to like, and it kind of makes sense, right? Because like my parents, like, well, if you look at people who were into metal when they were young in the 80s, like they're probably still into it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that does just, why would that just, like, Dad, like, you still like the same music you liked in like high school, and like, you know what I mean? Like, like my dad's super into classic rock and some of that kind of stuff, and it's like, it's not like you turn 30 and just suddenly like you're just done with all that, right? So I think it's just a disconnect, being like, well, you like this crazy hardcore screaming music, and like clearly you'll stop doing that. And like, apparently not. I don't know.
Yeah, I've ever since like I became a parent, really is where I start realizing like that. Yeah, if that didn't change me in that way, it changed me in plenty of ways. It changes us in plenty of ways, right? But like, if that didn't change me in that way, nothing was gonna. And like, a lot of people are like that, whether they have had children or not, right? And that was when it clicked to me, like, where it was like, oh yeah, like there's gonna be because I mean, for me, that's 25 years ago at this point, that I've been playing this kind of stuff. And it clicked to me, like, somewhere, after I like had my first kid and stuff. I was like, at some point there's gonna be like old folks' homes with like people listening to screamo and like gangster rap and like
Yeah.
because that's what you grew up with, that's what you love, and like that didn't change. It's just the reason people don't. There's no context for that like yet, because both these
Yeah.
art forms are they're young.
Yeah.
Like
And again, there are certain aspects of like there's some aspects of all genres, right, that can feel kind of juvenile, right? So when you're like there was stuff that I listened to in high school that I thought was like so good, and now I don't want to listen to that anymore. Even though it might be in the same world, but like like mature music, that's like has that's artistic and everything that, and yeah, I don't see that going away for me. You know what I mean?
I thought I would feel that way, like at some point about like I don't know, like Dead Milkman or They Might Be Giants or
Mm-hmm.
something. But I still am like, oh, this shit is so good.
Well, that's the thing. You also come back and you're like, oh, like there's also part of like getting older too. You're like, well, I don't need to take myself too seriously, and also like I can just listen to whatever the fuck I want because
Yeah.
I'm confident enough in who I am, and I also think it's like I think it's important for parents to like have personality, and like I think it was kind of a thing, right? You're like, oh, you're a parent now, you're a grown up, whatever else. Like, all right, time to put all that stuff away, and you just like, I don't know. I think it's good for my kids to see me being who I am and expressing myself, and yep, dad's listening to crazy music, and like, guess what? My kids like it, and so
Yeah.
like, yeah, we listen to like screamo and metal and post rock and all kind of shit in my house. Like, we listen to a lot of other stuff too, but like, it's just like, yep, that's just dad's music,
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. Like my kids don't like music at all. I don't. my oldest does. She makes music. She makes like synthwave, sort
Sure.
of like 80s inspired sounding stuff. It's really good. I've heard some of it. And but yeah, she doesn't like.
Yeah, and like I would, I'd love to like, I don't expect, because like the same way like my parents, right? Like, I think if I was just like, grew up and was like, I appreciate a ton of the music that they exposed us to. And I do listen to some of it kind of on my own, but like, I don't expect my kids to like just be these like, I only listen to screamo and that's like my thing, right? It'd be cool if they got into it, but like I have no idea where music's going to go by the time in 10 years when they're in high school and kind of figure it out for themselves. But like I think it's important to just know that like this kind of stuff's, that there's more out there than just like whatever.
Yeah.
So.
I personally like, I want like my kids to be like, what the stuff that the stuff that you like is for losers. Like this is this shit right here is hardcore, and play something that like breaks all kinds of rules that we didn't know existed. Like, and
exactly.
I want to be like, I want to hear it and be like, I want to detest it right away because it's that abrasive, and then I'm like, no, this like fucks. This is good, right?
Like I'd love to be like, I'd love to be open-minded enough and surprised when they come home with something, or like when my kids are old, it's like, hey, we want to go to see this concert. I'm like, let's hear it, man. Like like I'm down. Like my parents never really like. I think they took us to, my parents took me to my first concert, which was like Elton John when I was like 14.
Oh, that's kind of sick though, honestly.
Which was cool. Which was cool. Again, they listen to a lot of classic rock. I like classic rock. And that was like a cool thing. But then like within a year and a half, I was going with Andrew and his friends to like punk shows and stuff like that. And they never came along to that kind of stuff,
Yeah. Were you going to like bigger like shows like at like 2,000 capacities, or were you going to like down to the VFW and seeing bands in front of 50 people?
Yeah, so I was in high school and college, kind of north of Detroit. And so we went to Detroit for shows a lot. I'd say, so the one venue we went to a lot was St. Andrews Hall with the Shelter, was like the basement of that. And we saw just tons of punk shows at the Shelter. And the Shelter's probably, I don't know, maybe 500 person capacity. And then upstairs, I'd say, probably more like that, 1,000, maybe 2,000. And so I remember seeing bigger shows up at St. Andrews. Like I remember seeing, when Thrice came through on the Illusion of Safety tour, we saw them there, kind of thing. But then we would see, Alexis on Fire in the basement.
Right.
But we also, by that point, we were playing like whatever shows we could get. So we were playing basements, we were playing VFW halls, we were playing like roller rinks and shit. Like, just being like a 16-year-old in a screamo band, just trying to do whatever, right?
That's awesome, though. A roller rink.
Dude, that was the first Ministry show, that roller rink.
Was there like a roller equivalent of like a circle pit, or?
I mean, there was people skating on the roller rink, and then there was like this stage to the side. And was that the show? There was some crazy show where like some hip hop kids and some punk kids like started a big fight, and I don't know. Andrew would know the story better. It was a crazy time, but
At one of the shows, though.
Yeah, at one of the shows. And then there was a fest there. Like, I think we played with that band Chiodas.
Yeah.
They were from our town. I think they were still called like Chiodas Brothers at the time.
Yeah.
But if we were 16, they were a couple years older than us, something like that. But so it was like, again, there was a cool scene there. There was this band called For Dire Life's Sake, who was like a metalcore band. They kind of blew up a little bit. So yeah,
it's awesome. But you spoke about Men as Trees earlier. Was that the first band that you were in where you realized like, hey, we could be putting out records, and we could be like going on bigger tours and stuff like that?
Kind of. It was a process. So that was like. Me, Andrew, and Frank had kind of played in another iteration of kind of getting toward that kind of thing. And I briefly played I played like one show with this like pop punk band that I tried to turn into a screamo band. I was like, this is cool, but I'm just going to make like raptor noises over here in the corner. Men as Trees, again, that's kind of like, that was like a learning band. So like we, that was our first time ever recording music, and our first time playing a lot of shows, and then our first time playing out of town, and then first time, kind of doing everything. Like that was our band from when I was like 16 to like, I think we were done when I was like 23 years old. Mm-hmm. I was trying to remember if we ever played together. We definitely did. I'm trying to remember whenever we played first together.
I don't remember playing with Ministries.
Well, we definitely played. There was were you guys on that fest with Camadre when they came through in
No,
Illinois?
no,
No, you weren't. Okay,
no. That
because
would have been sick, but if it,
we definitely played Illinois. Like we were playing Indiana in like 2008, 2009 on tours.
yeah. See,
But I don't know. Was Como was going by that, weren't they?
no, we got started in March. It's funny. We got started in March 2010 and had our first 7-inch by July 2010.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
you can't do that now.
No, no.
And not because you can't write songs and record them by then, like not that part, but yeah, the other part, the 7-inch.
Yeah, the 7-inch part. Yeah, we've been talking about some splits, and like like Venice Trees, like I feel like 7 inches now just seem kind of like problematically expensive, unfortunately.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But that was like the last thing we did as Ministries was like kind of like put a 7-inch out, which was like super cool for us because that was our first vinyl. Because we did all CDs up to then.
Yeah, I was not. I was only in like between like 2005 and when Coma Regalia started. I was only in one other band, and we
Okay.
only played like 2 shows. Period.
Okay.
So I had that bit of time there. That was a little while after I had my oldest, where I just like wasn't playing music. It was
Yeah.
it was really, I was just having a really really bad time, like emotionally. Like I had so much travel anxiety and
Okay.
like agoraphobia, like, and stuff, and it was just real bad. So
And like having a kid can make you confront that kind of stuff, but also give you an excuse.
Yeah,
to
that's
be like
the
oh,
thing.
I don't want
Right.
to see people. Well, I'm home with a baby, so like I
Yeah,
don't have to.
that's the thing. It gave me permission to like
Yeah.
not like face it down and stuff, you know?
Yeah, and like being a young parent and doing anything, but extracurricular stuff like music was, again, that's kind of what took me out of the game for a few years.
Yeah, you got to get your bearings. You got to.
Yeah. So I didn't really, I didn't play much between like 2017 and 2022. I played guitar like at home, but like other than that, I wasn't really playing at all. So.
Yeah. So, one thing I wanted to touch on, or talk about,
Sure.
is when you all made the transition from Locktender to Ministries. It's like very very similar style, little changes in the lineup, but the major thing was Locktender. All of the pieces of music would be constructed or based around pieces of art.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
sorry,
go ahead.
So you can finish.
Oh, well, it's sort of a tiered question because I maybe spoke with Andrew about this as well, but like, I just wanted to know, like, where did that idea germinate? Like, and
Sure.
also, touch on some of the processes for selecting album art, because I think it's really interesting. And I know for sure I didn't talk to Andrew about was I think that the idea of the album being based on a piece of art and then having to talk to another artist to interpret your vision of the album is a really fascinating idea as well. So I wanted to get your thoughts about both of those things.
Yeah. No, I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah.
So the germination of that, I did my degree in English literature. So read just a crazy amount in college and lots of poetry. And I found, I did a unit or at some point, the idea of what's called an ekphrasis poem, which basically is a poem about a work of art. and I guess it was pretty popular. Like you're like this goes back to like ancient Greece.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was really cool. And there was a poetry contest. I think it was at my school, or it was in a poetry magazine that one of my professors who had read my stuff suggested that I enter. And so I was at a museum and I saw this sculpture and I wrote a poem about it. And that I really enjoyed that process. It was kind of a cool way to kind of like just like work your like poetic muscle and like, you know, try and like, all right, how can you describe, take something that's physical and transform it into words, you know, in kind of in a way that can be evocative of it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And so like by the end of Men as Trees, we were already kind of touching on this. So the last 3 songs that we ever did, 2 of which ended up on vinyl, one of which was unreleased, were all about this painting called The Sea of Ice by the German painter Caspar David Friedreich, who we would eventually, you know, 10 years later do an album about for Locktender. So that idea was kind of taken in there. And like Men as Trees, like I did all the lyrics for Men as Trees, and they were like really indecipherably busy. Like I would just, because I was reading so much at the time, there was just like a million allusions to literature and film and this and that. And like, you know, it all made sense to me, but it like, I like, you know, if you couldn't understand our lyrics, that like, of course you couldn't. They were like, you know, kind of, they were insane. So when we got to this last period, this Sea of Ice thing, you know, it kind of gave me a lot of focus to kind of like get out of my own world a little bit and kind of like, why don't you just write about this thing and kind of strip away that elusiveness and kind of be a bit more direct and be like, just describe this scene and describe what it makes you feel. And then, you know, when we put the music to it, I was like, oh wow, you know, this music, I think kind of, you can make the music evocative of the work as well, you know? And so that was kind of the germination of that idea. I really liked it. I originally had an idea, because I studied history as well, that like I want to do this band where every song was like a moment in history. So you'd have the date, the name of this thing, and then the song would be about this kind of thing. So that was kind of like that was kind of one idea at the start of Locktender, and then we kind of moved into this write songs about artists kind of thing. And it kind of came about kind of organically. And then it was kind of nice to commit to that, because like, I don't really like writing, very personally, I guess. Like I don't want to talk about, you know, my feelings about, you know, a romantic partner or about my childhood or this kind of stuff. Like that's just not really what I want to write about.
Sure.
I'm happy to talk about that stuff indirectly, you know, and kind of channel into my lyrics. But by kind of like narrowing the focus, it was kind of nice. Like, all right, what kind of band are we? Like, well, we're going to be this band that writes about these kind of things. And, you know, through the lens of like, all right, like you can be really creative, I think, through that. And like, but it just gives you a focus, I think.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And so we started Locktender. We started with 3 songs based on 3 different artists. And that became like we started with like 3 splits, one of which was with you guys, that 4-way. And then after that, we were kind of simultaneously looking at, we had with this big collection of songs that would become our albums, Kafka and Rodin. And for me, so like I really enjoy the research part of our albums. So like I'll kind of like, you know, when we did Rodin, I read 3 or 4 biographies of him. I got books of, you know, letters Rodin wrote to friends and other artists. I would look at like art criticism, And I would just like really dive into an artist to kind of try and get in the world before I started the lyric writing process. So like really do a deep dive and kind of get into there. And then that would kind of then inform the lyrics. Kafka was a little like, which was our first like full length, was a little like messy because I think it was like I was writing lyrics, Nick was writing lyrics, and Andrew was writing lyrics, and we'd all kind of be on the same theme, but like there'd be kind of three different voices going on at the same time, you know? Mm-hmm. By the time we got to Rodan, I feel like we were kind of hitting the idea in a much more concise way, kind of saying what we wanted to say, and then another. So then the art is like another really fun aspect of this. Of like, okay, how do we like pay homage to this artist without just like kind of being derivative? You know? And so for Kafka, his books inhabit this kind of world, this very absurdist world of kind of, dreams and nightmares and confusion. And so the artist, John, who did most of our albums, or I guess all of our albums up till now, he had this idea to take all these pictures of his dogs and like warp them into these like weird monsters. And that kind of became the cover and the art for Kafka, which is really cool. And
I didn't even know that's what that was. I have to look at that again.
Yeah, inside there's a poster, and they're like drawing out like these like scientific figures and stuff like that.
I was thinking of the actual cover.
Yeah, and the covers looks like eyes and noses and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's very like I don't know. It's definitely got like a Lovecraftian feel.
Yeah, it's kind of I think it's kind of Kafkaesque, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then for Rodan, we did decide to take a much more direct approach because I think outside of the thinker, people don't like his works aren't really that much in popular culture. Like everyone knows that sculpture, but his works I just think so powerful. And Andrew was living in Philadelphia at the time. The Rodin Museum in Philly is the second largest collection of his work outside of Paris. And so we went there with my sister who was studying photography. She took all those photos and we're like, let's take these photos, but rather than the way, you see his sculptures is on this very big grand scale. Like, all the photos of that are from a sculpture called the Bergers of Calais, which is when you see it in person, it's so imposing because you have these 6-8 foot tall statues that are just, it's such a big piece, right? So we decided that let's just do close-ups of, their hands and their feet and the faces, and then use that as the art for that record. And then Friedrich, I love the art for this. We same thing. He was a landscape painter from the 19th century, and so a friend of Andrew's, he's now living in Western Michigan, took photos of the sand dunes along the lake there, and kind of inverted them and turned them into this really kind of washed out, wintry, kind of refracted landscape. Yeah. So again, we're kind of how can we take something from the artists themselves, but then kind of make it a little bit different.
Yeah. It's why, it's like no one wants to just swipe it, right? No one wants to just say, hey, like this is what, and no one wants to try to put words into a dead artist's mouth either.
Yeah,
nobody. Yeah, it's like you don't want to be like, I'm making the next thing that they would have made. It's a tricky.
Totally. So it's like, I think, I'll be very transparent about that. Like, this is my, as a, whatever age person living in the 21st century, these are my personal kind of explorations and reflections on this art. It's not meant to be definitive. It's not meant to say anything. And like, so again, it's really, I really enjoy that part of it. Like, I think, I'm glad you asked that question, because it's one of the things that I think maybe doesn't always come across in our music, because we Again, there's a lot of behind the scenes thought and work that kind of goes into us kind of choosing the next direction.
Yeah. And, as I wanted to ask as well, because we're talking about the research, and this is, me being a, a cartoonist, but there's so much of what I do that is like, it is just research and it is just thought. And to be honest with you, I do not know. Like, I do it and I feel like I need to do it because it informs the part of me that makes the decisions, right? But like, this 3 days that I spent like researching, like sand dunes and like the surface textures of moons and shit like that. This is not gonna fucking matter for this 2 pages of this comic book, right? It's not, right?
Well,
But it matters because I gotta get there, right? So like,
I think it's important. I think it informs your authenticity, and I think like, do you know the director Akira Kurosawa?
yeah.
So he was like next level with stuff like that, where it might have been the filming of his film Redbeard, where like, it takes place in the 19th century. Like, there was nothing on set that wasn't allowed to be period like appropriate. Like he went so far as like the drawer. If there's a scene where there's like a cabinet, that cabinet had to be full with things that would be necessary in this. Like, the cabinet's never open, it's never seen.
Oh wow.
But it's like, and he drove people crazy with the level of detail he needed to have to reach that level of authenticity, right?
Yeah.
So, I guess, it doesn't matter to like, I don't need a listener to know as much as I do about a subject.
Sure.
But I also want to make sure, like, well, two things. I want to make sure like that there's something there, because like if I see an artist that I think is kind of interesting, and we try and kind of dig into it, and either there's not enough information available, it kind of like, okay, well, maybe that's a song, but maybe there's not enough there to kind of get into a full length. And if you have an artist that you can like, wow, like they've got this catalog of amazing works, and it turns out they're also this really interesting person, and it turns out, that they, there's all this background that like, I'd love for someone to listen to one of our songs and then be like, oh, cool, what's that about? And then take the next step to be like, oh, wow, turns out I really like this painter. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know that people take that leap, but I think it'd be cool if they did,
Yeah.
And so you have to do the research on your end to make sure there's something there. And again, I don't know. It's like, and with, as far as like the level of detail that goes into your art, like you're studying the natural world so that you can, it's almost like, like people, would give shit to like these minimalist painters who just do like a big blank canvas. And it's like, these people like can paint, they could paint you a Renaissance style, whatever scene of detail. And so you almost have to have the know-how before you can approach that kind of minimalism. And so it's like, yeah, you're like, I want to study this. And then it becomes your decision. Like, I'm not just not drawing these dunes well because I can't. It's because I've decided that this is how I want to interpret them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. What's the biggest, like, what's the most shocking thing that you've discovered about one of these artists, like, while you're doing your research?
So we kind of had, not like, it's not a hard policy, but generally we choose artists who are dead. because I think that's a good safety bet to like, I would hate to choose an artist who is awesome and then they turn into like a giant Nazi.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you're like, oh shit. So like having people dead for at least a while is nice. A nice little safety buffer.
Yeah.
A lot of the artists we chose would have all died in obscurity, even if they're really well appreciated in now.
Yeah.
Like we did a song for Herman Melville, died in obscurity. Friedrich died crazy. Kafka died very young and no one gave a shit. Rodin also died alone and crazy. You know, like it's kind of like a nice theme, especially I think for like, I don't know. I think if you play screamo, you can resonate with that idea. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Like, yeah, I'm gonna spend my life making this obscure music, and then just like that's it. But it doesn't mean it wasn't important. So you've got these. So that's one thing that's always kind of surprising. Like, and I don't think I knew that until I kind of dove into these things, and you'd read about these characters and just like literally people who made this art that was so amazing that like people literally thought they were insane, you know?
Yeah.
And they were people who were so either ahead of their time or so bold, or, you know, and you look back now, you know, like you look at like when Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick, like there was like, you know, a headline that was like, I think it said literally like Herman Melville insane ?
Wow.
You know, it's like, it's a pillar of American fiction, you know, but it was, you know, 50 years ahead of his time. So I always like, it's interesting. It's interesting to see that story repeated again and again. So all of our new music is going to be about this painter named Kay Sage, this American painter. She had a really interesting life that I've discovered, and she was fairly close-lipped. Like she did not give interviews. She did not like to talk about herself. She refused to talk about her art, and in a way that is very mysterious and kind of alluring at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, so learning about her, you know, her life was fascinating. You know, she was a princess briefly. Like she was like married to this Italian prince in Italy in the 1920s, and then threw it all away to go be a painter in Paris in the 1930s when like that was just like not something a woman could do at all. So like she kind of tried to get into this like boys club of painters who like very, very much rejected her. And she just like kept at it for 20, 30 years. And, you know, ended up making a pretty awesome name for herself. You know, again, still not widely known. But, you know, but she lived her life as a painter the whole time, regardless. She had a very sad end of life. One of a couple of the new songs are about, and newsflash, they're depressing. So
yeah, that's wild. I'll definitely have to look into her. I can relate to the Italian princess thing because when I got a vegan pizza over there for like just a couple euros, I thought I was, you know, royalty as well. But yeah, a hell of a way to switch subjects. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to more Locktender, of course. And you know, I'm sure people have checked out Sage Part 1 by now, but if not, they should. But we're gonna switch to the other thing that you've dropped recently, which is your project with Eric Anderson, who people know from Lord Snow. Inosuke, am I saying that right?
Yeah, I'd say Inosuke, but
Inosuke. Okay,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, fine.
Right. So this is like a no-brainer. Like Eric is in your, like, do y'all live kind of close together, and then it's just like this is a no-brainer. Like this is one of the most talented drummers.
It was kind of, but like I was nervous to start playing with him because I'd been playing. You know, I played guitar in Ministries, and then basically didn't play much guitar for about a decade when I was playing. I was playing bass and Locktender until now. And so I had started playing guitar and started writing a little bit but I hadn't, I didn't have this like library of songs kind of ready. In Locktender, Andrew's the primary songwriter. Like there are some songs I brought to the table. For the most part, he's the one who's showing up, and then we'd work things through. So I found out that Eric, moved to our area kind of randomly, and I reached out to him. I know him from playing shows together back like forever ago, but not like we weren't very close. And I just kind of, I knew he had a daughter, so we got together, like at a park, and like, I think we did that a few times. And then he's kind of like, "Hey, man," because I knew we talked a bit about music, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Stormlight, I'm working on, and waiting on some, New Lord Snow stuff, and blah blah." And then he just asked if we wanted to jam, and I was like, "Yeah, man, that's like I miss having a regular band, like Locktender." Like for the early years, we practiced every week, twice a week, for years and years. And, doing the long distance thing, it works because we make it work. But, there's something about it's so cathartic to go blow off steam one night a week and play loud music with your buddies and just hang out. You know what I mean? And so we started, so he lives about a half hour from me, it turns out he doesn't really know people in town. And I've got a friend group here, but no one who plays music, other than Frank from Locktender, who's interested in this kind of stuff. So yeah, that kind of came together, and it kind of forced me to write some songs, and kind of figure out how I wanted that to sound, cause I didn't want it to be just like Locktender or Menace Trees, but at the same time, it's hard. That's kind of
that's your thing.
That's there's certain phrasings I like to use and chords I like to play when I'm writing. So there's obviously going to be a bit of an overlap. And we decided just to do the 2-piece thing, which is, I think it's amazing because we can work really fast, and there's the decision making is just 2 people, so it's really nice. Hey, you want to do this? Yes, great. But it's been awesome. It's been he's an amazing drummer, and I've written I feel like once him and I started playing together, and I kind of got a feel for how he drums, which is very 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 interesting. Obviously, now I write with kind of him in mind a little bit. As I'm kind of trying to strip pieces of songs together, but I've written, we did the first record, and I've got an hour's worth of music, ready to go for that band. So,
wow. Yeah. It's wild how you can start doing things that when somebody's strengths, and you're not I mean, this is different because I was writing to my own strengths or whatever, but when I sort of figured out what Jason is really good at, then I'm like, okay, this is I can do all the things that I couldn't do when I was on drums, or
yeah.
I can do things that didn't work in this other band for style reasons or whatever, and it's
Sure.
it's a lot of fun.
What is also I kind of know where all right, I can kind of he pushes me, and I can kind of push him as well. Sure. So it's this kind of back and forth where I think I'm really excited about our next record, which I think is going to be a 10-inch, but I think it's done. It's written. We're going to record it this summer. And I think it kind of takes where we started and puts it in it's a cool continuation from where we started to this kind of stuff. So I'm really excited about it.
That's awesome. What did you, how different did you approach writing the lyrics, and what is there an overarching theme to these albums, or?
Yeah. So, Yeah, so writing for Inosuke for that first record was very, very different, because like those are the most personal songs I've ever written, and I didn't really mean to, if that makes sense. Like
Sure.
I wasn't really thinking about it. I kind of just started writing, and I fit it to the music, and then we played our first show. Before we recorded, and I was up there screaming this stuff for the first time, and I was like, oh man, I'm feeling really vulnerable right now. Like I didn't realize I'm just like screaming my guts up here, kind of by myself. And yeah, so this was a very different approach, because I think Locktender is nice because even though it's very emotional music, the subject matter allows it to kind of be at arm's length.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, so those first, the first Inosuke record is very much, very personal about kind of a tough year I was having. I was having a lot of issues with with pain and some stuff. And, yeah, I think a lot of that kind of got channeled into the music, and a decent amount of kind of still in the pandemic nihilism, and the next record is a bit less personal. And I think I'll try and find a nice balance going forward of like where that's going to be. But like, yeah, like those are songs were really emotional to perform and to record.
Yeah, for sure. So and you've done both of these recordings. You did Sage and you did the Inosuke record. Like Eric recorded them both, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he, we practiced at his house in his basement, and he'd kind of said, he's like, I've dabbled with self-recording, and he's like, I want to like learn this and get into it. So recording that first record was like a big learning process. Like we were kind of just figuring it all out, and I think that shows between like the stuff we learned there, we were able to apply when Locktender did Sage.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Locktender's first time recording not all live. So like we've always done like everyone's in a room, cabs are somewhat isolated, and we try and get these songs in like as few as takes as possible. So like a lot of times we're doing, we've done like 13-minute songs in like one take without cuts and stuff like that. And that was kind of just the way we learned how to do it with Men as Trees, and it was very kind of vibing off each other and that kind of stuff. So Eric's doesn't have any isolation, so that didn't really work. And so, I laid down a scratch track for those with Frank, and then everyone kind of came in and did their parts on top of it. I think the result is good, and I think it's kind of what we wanted, because it's, I think, a lot less polished and a lot more raw than some of the stuff we've done. Like definitely than like Friedrich, which was like, we did at a friend's studio,
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think it was, a pretty positive experience. I think that's the plan, is to do Sage 2 with Eric as well, if he's into it. And the plan is for us to keep doing the Inosuke stuff there. And I think they'll just kind of keep getting better, because we'll keep kind of learning, more and more how to do it. So
Yeah, for sure. So, these both of these releases came out within about 4 months of each other. So it's kind of like
yeah.
a pretty busy little quarter or whatever for you. But you mentioned that Sage Part 2 that's coming, and the next the Inosuke 10-inch. Like, do either of those bands have shows coming up or anything like that? Like,
Yeah.
what's in the pipeline?
Inosuke doesn't have anything booked right now, which is good, because I think that'll give us I think if a show comes up locally, we'd probably just figure out how to do it. But it'll give us kind of some space to like kind of dive into the recording process. And then Locktender is doing a tour in about a month. So a small tour. We're doing Cleveland, which will be our first. Well, we played a weird show like 3 weeks ago. Inosuke was supposed to play, but Eric had to fly out of state because of a family emergency. And so I got three of the four guys from Locktender to kind of like come together and do a quick little set. So that was kind of a Locktender show, but it was kind of like a weird one. But yeah, we're playing Cleveland, which is our first show in Cleveland. Like I think it's been like 8 years. And then we're doing Pittsburgh. We're going to Northern Virginia, I think, to meet up with the Kallicragas. And then we're doing Philly and New York with them as well.
Yeah, I think I saw that New York show. Looks bonkers.
Yeah, it's like it's them, hundreds of AU. It's very exciting. So so it's like a little jaunt. Like we've all got jobs and families and stuff like that. Like I don't know what touring is going to look like for us, so we'll kind of see. This is I'm excited to be playing again. We got these 5 shows. We're definitely going to be booking some more stuff later in the year, and next year and stuff like that. And we've got a set of mostly new music, to be honest, but that's kind of like we kind of tried to play some of the older stuff with the new lineup, and it just wasn't really vibing as well as we kind of thought. So at these shows we'll be playing Sage 1, Sage 2, which is unreleased, and then we'll actually be playing one song from Friedrich.
So how long is that set if you're playing like both the EPs and then also like 2 more songs?
I think it's about 40 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, the set's about 40 minutes. We probably won't do that at all the shows. Like we probably won't do that on the shows when we've got a bunch of bands and stuff like that. But maybe the first couple of days.
Yeah.
And again, we're trying not to get as crazy with the really, we used to do the really, really long songs, and that's like, it's fun and it's challenging, but it also is like stressful. And so I think we're like being a bit more, like a little more rigorous when we're writing songs about like cutting any of the fat and kind of just like, streamlining the songs a little bit. So
yeah. Also, if you're multi-tracking as opposed to live, that's like so much more time.
Yes.
To do a 20-minute song, because everyone has to do this 20 minutes like by themselves,
exactly.
Like however many times until it takes. But yeah, well, that's really exciting. Like I wish I was gonna be able to catch one of those shows, but say hi to everyone for me.
Yeah, we're gonna try and come out your way again. We might try and do like a Indiana, Chicago, something, in the fall. So maybe who knows? Maybe we can hit something up.
And that was my conversation with Jason Kallicragas. Thank you so much, Jason, for taking the time to chat with me. It's been too long. Thanks to all of y'all for listening wherever you are as well. Until next time, take care and do good things.